Conall Burke had a million questions, and they all remained unanswered. He drove toward the address Kat had given him, to deal with the case of missing war dog Bacchus. Conall didn't have a clue what he would do about it, even if the dog were still missing. He understood from the other guys working with Badger on various projects that he and Kat had been locating lost war dogs for the last year or so, and they'd just received another 4 cases. It didn't say much for the War Department that this many war dogs would be missing, but since hundreds, if not thousands, or even tens of thousands of these dogs had been trained, maybe the ratio of lost dogs wasn't that bad. This case, well, it struck a little too close to home for Conall. This lost war dog had been adopted by Michael Stanford, a retired veteran who had lost a leg. Conall wondered if his matching injury wasn't part of what was in the back of Kat's mind. She was a devious woman, presumably with the best of intentions, though it often didn't appear that way. He loved her dearly, but he just never quite understood her. No one knew where she was coming from, except maybe Badger. She always came from the heart, so Conall trusted her. Still, when she looked at you, something else was going on in those knowing eyes. Conall shifted in the driver's seat of his old truck, grateful that he'd been asked to travel a little closer to home than the other guys had. With only one more state line to cross, he played the audio file of the interview on his phone as he drove. He understood a part of the problem was that Bacchus had been placed with an older veteran who was in a wheelchair. He still had some mobility, but the wheelchair was to help him get around a lot easier. The dog was part companion and part guard dog, and everything had been going fine, until the nephew had moved in to help out the old man. Then it wasn't long before the dog started disappearing throughout the day. It started off as a little bit of straying. Then his absences went longer and longer. The uncle and nephew had no idea where Bacchus went, and any attempt to keep the dog locked up inevitably ended. As soon as Bacchus went out to do his business, he took off. He came back, but there was always a time lag. One of these times, whether coming or going, nobody seemed to know which, he was hit by a vehicle, taken to the veterinarian for treatment, then kept overnight. According to Michael, when Bacchus was released the next day, somebody other than his nephew picked up the war dog, and nobody seemed to know where Bacchus went from there. A neighbor had asked him what had happened to the war dog. She herself had applied to get one and had been refused, so she'd been keeping an eye on this one and was always friendly with it. When Michael told her what had happened, she reported it to the War Department. Somehow that had come back down to Badger and Kat. Conall shook his head at the way things filtered through in the military. He didn't have any reason to suspect Michael of anything bad going on, but the fact that the dog's behavior changed after the nephew arrived did raise alarms. The behavioral change in a dog didn't happen for no reason. Conall couldn't say for sure that Bacchus was being abused or in any way mistreated, particularly by the nephew. Yet that's when the change had happened. Conall would definitely take a closer look at the nephew. The other problem was the old man hadn't reported it, and apparently hadn't found the missing dog. Now it had been weeks, so it would be all that much harder to track down where the dog had ended up. The vet clinic claimed that they received a note, saying that the dog should be released to the nephew, and it was signed by Michael, the primary caretaker. The old veteran stated that he hadn't signed any such thing, that it was just a complete fabrication, and that he wanted his dog back. That was an interesting point because, should the note exist, it did release the animal hospital of any kind of liability, but they should have checked with the owner first, regardless. The war dog had been going in for its regular shots and checkups, and it was not uncommon for somebody else to take the dog in, as the old man had transportation issues, given his wheelchair, and his car was not modified for that. The nephew stated that he knew nothing about the vet visit or about the war dog being released. Shutting off the recording, Conall noted his turnoff up ahead. It took another 20 minutes or so to reach the small town where the dog had been living.